On this edition of Great Lakes Now, what could climate change mean for the Great Lakes region?
You're going to see flooding be more frequent and more serious. You've seen what's happened with our lakefront. It's a crisis here.
The 5 worst blooms that we've ever seen on Lake Erie have all occurred since 2011.
And how are cities responding?
For green infrastructure, we're looking to spend nearly $100 million installing projects throughout the city of Buffalo.
This program is brought to you by the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation, Lori and Tim Wadhams, the Richard C. Devereaux Foundation for Energy and Environmental Programs at Detroit Public Television, the Polk Family Fund, Eve and Jerry Young, the Americana Foundation, the Brookby Foundation, and
the Consumers Energy Foundation is committed to serving Michigan, from preserving our state's natural resources and sustaining our future, to continuing business growth, academic achievement, and community involvement. Learn more at consumersenergy.com/foundation.
and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ward Duttweiler. Welcome to Great Lakes Now. This month, our show is going to look a little different. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had to produce our stories in new ways, and sometimes shoot with webcams or smartphones. This episode is also different because it's part of a collaborative reporting project called From Rust to Resilience: What Climate Change Means for Great Lakes Cities. Here are some of the journalists who participated to tell you about it.
From Rust to Resilience is a collaboration of 8 newsrooms across the Great Lakes Basin, brought together by the Institute for Nonprofit News.
It's a look at how climate change is affecting the Rust Belt cities along the Great Lakes.
It's a really critical issue that's going to affect all parts of our society in the future.
This is the entire world, our entire existence on this planet. So there's nothing more important than talking about climate change.
There are a lot of challenges related to climate change in the Great Lakes.
It's going to be extremes. Erosion on these lake shores, increased tick and mosquito-borne diseases.
Heat waves, which can kill many people in cities, as we saw in Chicago in the 1990s. And then flooding. A lot of these Great Lakes cities are extremely vulnerable to urban flooding.
It's amazing how many people don't have flood insurance.
We're seeing increased storms, increased erosion, increased heat in the cities.
But the good news is that the threat of climate change also presents an opportunity for new innovation and new economic development.
There are solutions.
We're going to look at some of the creative solutions that people have proposed all across the Great Lakes.
And we are all working together to try to tell the broadest story that we can. If we all combine our resources, we can tell a deeper story.
These stories are part of the Pulitzer Center's Connected Coastlines reporting initiative. The harmful algal blooms in western Lake Erie have been a problem for years. Climate change is likely to bring increased precipitation and more frequent storms, and both those factors could make the blooms worse.
Every summer, usually around the beginning of July, western Lake Erie transforms into something resembling pea soup.
We are on Lake Erie, headed to Luna Pier. The week after the forecast, we started seeing the bloom start, and the bloom has grown almost exponentially since then.
Eddie Verheim is a project engineer with Limnotech. A good part of his summer is spent maintaining environmental monitoring buoys on Lake Erie.
So we've seen it almost double, triple, quadruple in size in about a 2-week period. So it's covering about 300 square miles right now.
Eddie is one of an army of scientists and researchers who have converged on Lake Erie to study and predict harmful algal blooms.
Many of these freshwater blooms, they're actually a type of bacteria that are referred to as cyanobacteria.
Dr. Gregory Dick is a research scientist at the University of Michigan. His lab's research is helping us understand the genetic makeup of harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie.
And so these cyanobacteria are the organisms that originally invented oxygen-producing photosynthesis billions of years ago. But for historical reasons, they've also been called blue-green algae, and that sort of informal name sticks with the cyanobacteria. The blooms that we're seeing in Lake Erie represent an unnatural flux of nutrients.
Understanding and predicting harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie begins deep inside the agricultural heartland of Ohio.
When you think of anything that, even us, anything that anybody needs to live, we have a certain number of nutrients that are required. The first thing is carbon.
Dr. Laura Johnson is the director of the National Center for Water Quality Research at Heidelberg University. Her team tracks nutrient data, which help predict the scale of blooms in Lake Erie.
Plants, they can fix carbon from photosynthesis. But the other two big things we need is nitrogen and phosphorus. So phosphorus is just one of those things that we need to apply to soil to make sure that we get good crop growth. Turns out, if you apply something to the soil that can run off, algae, even cyanobacteria, they're not all that different from the plants you're trying to encourage to grow. And if that stuff runs off and gets into a lake, they're encouraged to grow too. And those situations, when you get a lot of runoff, that's when you start to see big algae blooms.
When you have lots of nutrients and you have warm temperatures in the summertime and you have calm waters, that is conducive to the growth of what we call bloom-forming bacteria, cyanobacteria, that grow to really high densities and that produce certain toxins, certain molecules that are of concern due to their toxicity.
We started detecting harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie in the late 1990s. They were large enough to see from satellite starting in about 2002. The 5 worst blooms that we've ever seen on Lake Erie have all occurred since 2011. The problem's getting worse.
And we're getting close to the water intake crib for the city of Toledo. There's a funnel there that goes back to the pump station on shore. During 2014, there was a very large algal bloom very close to the water intake crib, but the city didn't really know that the bloom was there until they started sucking it into their water intake. Bad water was already at the plant. That was when the Toledo water crisis happened. Folks couldn't drink water in the city.
It was the highest toxicity of any of the blooms in the last 4 or 5 years.
Dr. Rick Stumpf is an oceanographer with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Centers for Coastal Ocean Science.
For a drinking water plant, it's really easy to remove the toxin if it's in the cells. You just settle the cells out, all the toxin's gone. If the toxin's dissolved in the water itself, not in the cells, they have to use chemical treatment. It's harder to do, harder to get rid of it. All these cells were being broken open, releasing all of their toxin, and this is a really toxic bloom. And it was early, so the combination was a surprise. It won't happen again. Might happen somewhere else. Won't happen in Toledo because we now have things we didn't have in 2014 in July.
500,000 Toledo residents experienced a 72-hour drinking water crisis as a result of harmful algal blooms in 2014. Since then, a web of monitoring sondes, or sensors, have been deployed as sentinels for water quality and public health.
We're coming up on our buoy. This is the Limnotech water quality weather buoy that was installed about 2 weeks after the water crisis, and it's been here every summer since then. We have a water quality sensor on this buoy that's measuring turbidity, it's measuring chlorophyll, how green is the water. We're also measuring for harmful algae or blue-green algae.
Andy McClure is the water administrator at Toledo's Collins Park Water Treatment Plant.
In 2014, we didn't have the data science. We couldn't react quickly to changes in the lake. We knew lake conditions were changing several hours after they've already changed. So that's one of the big things at data science, the buoy and the sondes in our intake crib and those service. We know right away when water quality is changing.
So when there's a bloom going on, we combine instruments in the water samples, and the satellite data and say, here's where the bloom is now, here's how toxic it is, this is where we expect it to be tomorrow, the next day.
Whereas we've gotten pretty good at forecasting the size and movement of blooms, we're in the very early stages of being able to forecast or predict toxicity. And so that's where we're hoping some of the studies that my lab and others are doing are going to inform models that could allow us to make forecasts and predictions about toxicity.
We know that the harmful algal blooms are driven by the amount of phosphorus that comes in during the spring. The spring of 2011 and the spring of 2015 were incredibly wet springs. As a result, we had huge amounts of phosphorus go into the lake, and we had the biggest blooms that we've ever seen. We want to keep the agricultural production high. We need that food, if everyone would not apply more than is needed and would insert it into the soil when it was applied, those two actions alone would reduce the amount of phosphorus leaving the agricultural fields by over 60%, and we only need a 40% reduction.
So if you listen to anybody these days talking about how do we fix this problem, that's one of the things that always seems to come up. It's a nutrient management issue. I think we have a lot of good theories as to exactly why we've seen these dissolved phosphorus losses and then what practices are going to fix them. But we haven't been able to see that play out on the ground as much as we would like.
Adding to the challenges of balancing agricultural production and managing nutrients, the scientific community is now grappling with an emerging driver of bloom formation: climate change.
We haven't even made a little bit of progress in reducing that flow-weighted mean concentration. We've got to take this much more seriously. We now know that 70 to 90% of the phosphorus that comes into the lake comes in during the 10 worst storm events each year, and we're seeing every year more frequent, severe storms.
The frequency and the size and the magnitude of these blooms is increasing. That has been well documented, and it's thought that that is tied to this excess nutrients, so increasing amounts of nutrients that are coming into natural waterways. It also has to do with climate change, both in terms of increasing temperatures as well as increasing precipitation, which increases nutrient loads from land into lakes.
The overarching looming thing that we're going to be challenged with moving forward is climate change. You know, we're seeing more extremes on both ends of the spectrum. If we have more intense rain events early in the spring followed by drought conditions later in the summer, that is worst case scenario for bloom formation, because hot, dry, long periods of time after we've had big inputs into the lake, that leads to big blooms. And so the question is, well, if that's our scenario and that's what's going to be happening moving forward, then we need to be prepared. In mid-century, because of climate change, it might just lead us to where we are right now, which means we're maintaining the current frequency of severe blooms, which is good, but then that means we haven't made any progress. We need to come up with some new technologies and novel ideas with how to deal with lots of water moving across the ground and then subsequently no water.
We have more on Lake Erie's harmful algae blooms at greatlakesnow.org. Of course, phosphorus and nitrogen aren't the only things we want to keep out of the lakes. Climate change will probably mean bigger storms, and stormwater can drive untreated sewage into the lakes. In Buffalo, they're taking aggressive action to keep that from happening with green infrastructure.
In his 2020 State of the City address, Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown delivered some big news.
We are investing $400 million in water quality capital improvements over 20 years, with the largest environmental impact bond in America's history. And I want to thank O.J. McFoy and his team for putting together that plan.
O.J. McFoy is the general manager of the Buffalo Sewer Authority. The city's $30 million environmental impact bond will help the authority keep the city's wastewater out of the Niagara River.
We were established in 1935. The treatment facility was finished in 1938 here in Bird Island. Before that, the city of Buffalo simply had a system of trunk sewers that just released out here into our Niagara River. After time, we found that, that's probably not the best idea, but we were able to connect those systems and get them to our treatment facility and then having clean water come out the other end. Over the years, we've been making gradual improvements not only to our system of trunk sewers that stretch out over 850 miles throughout our city, but also to our treatment facility as we've been going along.
Like many older cities, Buffalo's combined sewer system was engineered to carry away sewage, industrial wastewater, and storm runoff in the same pipe and as quickly as possible to then be cleaned at its wastewater treatment plant. But with the ever-increasing effects of climate change, maintaining clean water with this combined sewer system has become a monumental challenge.
Climate change is having a big effect in the city of Buffalo. What is happening here is we are getting more and more intense storms. Some of those storms have broken records. Some individual climate change concerns that we are dealing with in the city of Buffalo really are focused in on urban flooding and combined sewer overflows.
Large storm events can overwhelm the sewer system, sending raw sewage directly into nearby streams and rivers.
Storm waste is you get the rain falling and it picks up everything off of the streets. So whether that's the oils, the greases, the trash, those things coming from animals, it picks all of that stuff and just puts it into our waterways.
The City and Sewer Authority have been working to reduce stormwater runoff and combined sewer overflows. One solution? An ambitious green infrastructure program called RainCheck.
For green infrastructure, we're looking to spend nearly $100 million installing projects throughout the city of Buffalo. We have over 9 miles of green streets. We have been dealing with our vacant lots throughout the city of Buffalo as well.
Kevin Meindl, who works with OJ at the Buffalo Sewer Authority, is a landscape architect. He specializes in green infrastructure city planning.
Here in the city of Buffalo, we have a lot of impervious areas. Almost over 56% of our city is actually hard infrastructure. So that's pavement, concrete, asphalt, and it's just really lacking in green space and tree canopy. So green infrastructure is using natural systems to manage stormwater runoff where it falls. So when it rains, that water is now able to enter into the ground, into a planted area with soils and plants and trees, and allow it to mimic the natural water cycle throughout our city.
Green infrastructure can include rain gardens, planters, tree plantings, and parking lots made of porous asphalt. And it can do more than fight the effects of climate change.
We can transform street corridors, provide greater access to green space, reduce air pollution as well as water pollution, and really improving just the overall aesthetic of our community.
The Sewer Authority team is currently overseeing its largest green infrastructure project to date, the redesign of Niagara Street. When finished, it will be the longest green street in Buffalo.
When Niagara Street is complete, that will be a 4.5-mile green corridor. We will be installing green infrastructure to capture all of that runoff there and make sure that that is treated right there on the site, utilizing vegetative processes, utilizing under the sidewalk storage, as well as some pervious pavement areas.
So here we are on Niagara Street, where we're currently constructing rain gardens to manage the stormwater runoff from the road and the surrounding areas. These sites are made with a 50% compost and 50% sand mixture that allows water to really infiltrate into the ground while still providing nutrients for the plants to grow and thrive. In total, we'll manage over 15 acres of impervious area and manage over 800,000 gallons of stormwater runoff each year.
Our Niagara Street project, when it is completed, will be one of our crown pieces that we have throughout the city of Buffalo. 4.5 miles of a green, safe, bicycle-friendly, pedestrian-friendly corridor.
While Buffalo city officials have had much success in green infrastructure planning in the public domain, the new $30 million environmental impact bond will allow them to extend their reach even further.
So our $30 million that we are looking to invest in our specific communities really is focused in on growing green infrastructure outside of the right-of-way and the public space where we have been playing, and really getting ourselves into private communities and in private land. We're going to be working with community organizations, religious institutions, private businesses, but we want to make sure that we utilize these funds that we receive as a catalyst for ensuring that the city of Buffalo deals with the climate realities of this stormwater and these intense storms going forward.
For more on how communities are working to keep sewage from polluting the Great Lakes, visit us at greatlakesnow.org. Last winter, Chicago's lakefront took a beating from high lake levels combined with powerful storms. Damage was so severe it prompted the mayor to declare parts of the lakefront a disaster area, and City Council declared a climate emergency.
On January 11th, Chicago was hit with a massive storm that whipped up 23-foot waves on Lake Michigan and ravaged the city's waterfront. Patty Wetley is a journalist who's covered the storm's effects.
Chicagoans are actually used to wacky weather. We kind of, thrive on it and pride ourselves on it. But when you start to get even extremes for here, then people are like, oh my God, that, like we're used to craziness, but not things like that. People, they were losing power, freezing cold out. It was so miserable. Lake Michigan is no joke. These are the Great Lakes. They're huge. And Lake Michigan, it's deep, it's big, it's huge, and it has power.
On the city's far north side, the storm pounded several beaches, leaving neighborhood residents on edge.
It's really bad. And you hear crashing waves all the time. It's like you're living on the Pacific Ocean.
I dread a big storm now. I've seen enough big storms in my life. I don't need to see new ones because now they're doing damage.
After the storm, City Council passed a resolution declaring a climate emergency.
Resolution 2020-81, resolutions a declaration of a climate emergency and calls for the initiation of an emergency climate mobilization effort.
Citing catastrophic lakefront erosion, citywide flooding, and severe unseasonal weather, it calls for a climate mobilization on a scale not seen since World War II. Chicago Alderman Matt Martin co-sponsored the resolution.
We're in a climate change emergency. This is a crisis. You're going to see flooding be more frequent and more serious. You've seen what's happened with our lakefront. It's a crisis here.
Paul Wheeler has lived near several Northside beaches since 1991.
Just a few years ago, you could walk along long stretches of sand that are now completely underwater, several feet underwater. So when a wave comes in now, it does a lot of damage because there's nothing to stop it. It just rolls right up on land. To me, it's all about the lake level.
The lake, which is an even bigger problem, we've seen over the last number of years a 6-foot rise. I think it's risen by approximately 6 feet since 2013.
Satellite images confirm how Chicago's beaches have been shrinking as the lake levels have risen, and it's not expected to stop anytime soon.
The peak typically happens in the summer, and it looks likely that we will be breaking some more monthly records through the spring.
Mark Wagstaff is a senior waterfront engineer with Smith Group. The firm has been studying the lakefront for Chicago's Park District to develop a plan for the future.
The purpose of this plan is really to take a comprehensive look at the whole system and to make some recommendations for, urgent needs and then longer term, management.
That becomes trickier when you factor in the effects of climate change.
Some of the impacts will tend to drive more water in the lakes, so more intense precipitation, which is more runoff in the area. So I think some of the best science at the moment says that what we should expect in the future is increased variability.
In Chicago, with the lake, we're going to have to be dealing with these extreme highs and at the same time extreme lows. And where those cycles might have been 10, 15, 20, 30 years apart in the past, now they're going to start cycling through faster.
The threat to the lakefront posed by high water is visible right now. The Calumet Park Beach House is nearly swamped and most of the beach is gone.
It's right up to the beach there that under a normal conditions would be a pretty large beach, is completely covered, and there's facility that's right there on the water that it's getting close.
But there's also been success along the lakefront, which may serve as a blueprint for the future. During the last decade, Loyola Beach has been transformed into a dune habitat.
There have been a huge movement, I would say, by the Park District and by residents as well to restore native habitat. And there's been new plantings of plants that do particularly well grow in sand.
Those natural plantings are much more resilient. So even after a storm, those deep-rooted plants help to hold the sand in place. But it's also a terrific habitat for particularly a lot of the migratory birds.
A long-sloping beach also helps fight erosion.
And that shallower slope helps to dissipate some of the wave energy. Rainbow Beach down on the south side of the city is another one where that shallow slope is really good.
Since the January storms, the Park District and Army Corps of Engineers have been shoring up Howard, Rogers, and Juneway beaches.
They're rebuilding now. They're putting these new rocks and trying to reinforce it. But it was a great little beach before. I mean, you could go out for 2 blocks and still only be this deep, all sand, beautiful.
It's a temporary fix until a long-term solution is agreed upon. Recommendations were expected this spring, but they've been delayed by stay-at-home orders.
We're living in a time of profound uncertainty and instability. However Chicago goes, that's how Illinois is going to go, and we can be in a position to help guide where the entire country is going to go from a policy standpoint.
Thanks for watching. For more on how cities around the Great Lakes are responding to climate change, visit greatlakesnow.org. When you get there, you can follow us on social media or subscribe to our newsletter to get updates about our work. See you out on the lakes. These stories are part of the Pulitzer Center's Connected Coastlines Reporting Initiative.
This program is brought to you by the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation, Lori and Tim Wadhams, the Richard C. Devereaux Foundation for Energy and Environmental Programs at Detroit Public Television, the Polk Family Fund, Eve and Jerry Young, the Americana Foundation, the Brookby Foundation, and
the Consumers Energy Foundation is committed to serving Michigan, from preserving our state's natural resources and sustaining our future, to continuing business growth, academic achievement, and community involvement. Learn more at consumersenergy.com/foundation.
and viewers like you. Thank you.